Hey everyone, Mrhappy here, and welcome to, I guess it's barely Mondays at this point. So, okay, to be fair, last week I did record it on Sunday, but the movers came Monday, and I was up till 1 a.m. packing for the movers the night before, and then I forgot about it till and then this one, the movers didn't come till Monday, and I was in a temporary, listen, I'm just making excuses. Mondays with Mrhappy, it'll be back on the regular schedule after this video, which I am now recording on a Tuesday. Our weekly Q&A, at least for the time being. So, yeah. The move's not entirely done, but I'm in the new place, and it's a bit echoey because it's a little more spacious than I had thought. I thought, considering the cost wasn't going up much, that the space wasn't going up much, but this room in particular is quite a bit more spacious. So, welcome to the new Hap apartment. There's more room for activities, and look, my arm, it reflects inside of the YouTube silver. I'm going to have to move that because that's going to actually bother me in all of my recordings now that you see it and you can't unsee it either. But anyway, just wanted to let you guys know that's what's going on with me. That's why there hasn't been Baldessian Arsenal content on the channel outside of the initial clears. Haven't had time because I've been moving to the new apartment in the Bay Area. So, yay, San Francisco! Woohoo! Yay! Alright, I'm hungry, so let's get started. We got to thank our Patreon sponsors first. Of course, we have to do that, and I have the list over here, I promise. Yeah, so of course we have our Patrons of Light. We have Khuja Cross on Jenova. We have Kurenai Oni. You guys know him every week with the screenshots. And you know I'm going to say thank you to our Patrons of Light for going above and beyond to support us through #demonetized, which has made a minor resurgence lately. As some of you may know, there's some stuff going on with Adpocalypse 2.0 when it comes to YouTube, so definitely helps out through times like this whenever we're not really sure exactly what's going on. So thank you to our Patrons of Light especially. But that doesn't mean I'm not going to thank all of the patrons, all of the at least standard tier patrons that we have over on the Patreon channel. Starting with our standard tier patrons, we have Kevin, Wabatalia, Alma Elma, Dark Lumina from Jenova, Marianne, Ramil Gaming, Sabo Empire, Mizra, Red Wings of the Baron FC from Zalera, Cidus Oreo from Shiva, Syd Hellwind of Gilgamesh, Afro Ninja from Malboro, Cheesecake from Leviathan, That Lame Weeb, Ashen, Emiya of Cerberus, Fafarian, Rendil, Stevie-Rex, and Neon. We have a few extra elite sponsors today, so this part's probably going to take a while. We've got Trey, Edgefair on Ultros, Jerica, Emma, Nyrek of Clan Vizsla, Chris Suzuki, Crazy Meter from Midgar, Juventus from Cactar, Carol, Ray, Senchi, Shadowlink from Tomberry, Dom, Asuka Wake from Jenova, Limilla Nelhah, Midgard Sarah and the Fennel Family, Janhyua Yotsuyu, Kifka and the Grey Eagles on Exodus, Kadayoshi from Khuja, Skia Symphonia from Ragnarok, Rylanator Westaus The Purple Warrior, Edric Red Steel on Exodus, Lexxie Valentine, Mantaru the Rivivus FC from Zodiark, Sour Cream and Chives from Jenova, Rynoet Chikara, Valfarin of Siren, Phoenix Down FC on Goblin, and Saren from Zodiark. Finally, we have our premium sponsors, Vapatiam of Diablo, Shadow Ari of Brynhildr, Zeravire of Coral, Alchemy, Shinka, Casual Heroes FC on Midgard Sarma, Tatachitaka on Hyperion, Kana Izuki on Jenova, Ustarla on Coral, Sathal, Sarah Frost from Behemoth, Holy Tabasco, Crass015, Serenity FC on Ultras, Kat Kazuma, Ignis Fergan from Excalibur, Valestra of Fanfret, Noct Cordish from Excalibur, Crowus Moonscar, Private Mikey, Nani Kirasami, Rudy Rudiger, Killer Hackman, Rawl Jr., and Kiltastic Jones. Woof. I might be a little out of practice, but not that much. Just a little tired from all the moving. And again, hungry. But anyway, with all of our patrons thanked, and I thank you very, very much, let's move on to the questions and see if any of them were asked after Monday, because, again, I apologize. Question numero uno. Hi, Mrhappy. I've been watching your content for years. I don't know why I say it. Why everyone in my head is, hi, Mrhappy. I don't know why. Maybe it's because that's how I would say it. But never the courage to ask a question. So here it goes. Sorry if there's too much text. Not that much text, believe it or not. Oh, please have a first-time bonus of that evil underwater ball game being erased forever. Whew. You even left a TLDR for me, and I appreciate that. But your message isn't very long, so let's get to it. I love 14. Basically everything. Except that I have to play with people. Oh boy. I have social anxiety, yeah, that's something I can respect. But I push through so I can play with my close friends. I got to max level around 2.2 and my friends made ecstatic. They invited me, being new to games as well as MMOs. I didn't know what I was getting into. Long story short, it was a disaster and I left before they could ask me to. A couple years later, I still get terrible nerves and I'm always worried I'm not good enough and I will waste people's time. My DPS isn't stellar, but it's not terrible. I'm a red mage. But still, the entire time I queue for anything, I'm nervous. Do you have any advice? I was actually really happy to see the trust system be a possibility, even though most vocal people are against it. I think this might be a viable option going forward. Most people I talked to said to just suck it up. That's two questions. So first of all, in the trust thing, keep in mind you're not going to be able to do everything with trusts. They're there just to get you through the main scenario quests, really, and only, it seems, through the Shadowbringers main scenario quests in particular. They're not something that's going to be roaming the open world with you. You're not going to be taking them into raids and 24-mans. That's just not how it's going to operate. As for social anxiety, so here's the thing. I am not in any way legally or educationally fit to give you advice about social anxiety. All I can tell you is that despite what you may see, I'm a huge introvert. When it comes to meeting random people, you know how many times I've held a door open for somebody at like an event and they'll say thanks and I'll just be like, you too. I'm one of those people. It happens all the time. Now, that's not quite the same as the social anxiety you're referring to, but when I kind of just, it's, again, people say to suck it up, and I kind of just do. I always just got over it by focusing more on myself and what I need to be doing right, and not really caring so much what's happening around me. It's very hard for a negative voice to drown out a positive one, and so I've kind of just turned down the dial on negativity and tried to turn up the dial on positivity, especially after the last year or so, where I kind of just don't have time for any of that negative noise. You kind of just have to somehow deep within yourself accept there are people out there that even if you did well, they will fuck with you because you're red mage. That's it. You did nothing else to harm them. Maybe you played really, really well. They don't give a shit. They're like, red mage, why don't you play summoner? Fucking nerd. And then you know, social anxieties can maybe kick in from that, even if you did really well. So sometimes it's just about being able to recognize when noise is just noise and nothing more. But again, I'm in no way professionally able to tell you how to deal with the social anxiety. And that may be something that is a little bit more deep-seated and you may need to look at in your real life as opposed to focusing on it in just Final Fantasy XIV, because I guess overcoming it in one could help you overcome it in both. So if you can't overcome it in 14, it may be useful for you to actually seek someone who has a more professional means of dealing with it. Question number 2. Hello, Mr. Happy. How you doing? I'm doing all right. You doing all right? I'm doing all right. Long time viewer, first time asking a question, so here's a bonus of hoping the new exploratory style content is extremely good from the beginning. I'd rather have a simple question for you, and I hope it isn't a dumb one. We'll find out. So I'll not be able to pre-order Shadowbringers till after March 1st, which I believe is the distribution date for Aetheryte earrings. Will I still receive the Aetheryte earrings if I pre-order? I don't think it's a dumb question. I think I've gotten that question a lot. The answer is yes. As long as you pre-order at some point, even if you pre-ordered it on the 26th of June, you'd receive them. As long as it is pre-ordered before the game itself is releasing. By the way, when I say the 26th, I mean like June 26th, like 2 days before it comes out. As far as we know, as long as you are pre-ordering the game and not purchasing it after it is released, you will then immediately receive the rewards. That's how it's worked in the past for other pre-order bonuses. This one, they just happen to be distributing them early, so you'll be fine. So don't worry about it. All right, question number 3. Oh, no, hello? You know what? You've got 30 questions or 30 posts. I think you're good on hellos. I seem to remember when expansions happen to give you a one-time chance to alter your character's race and look. Is my memory correct? If so, are we expected to get that again at 5.0? The reason I asked is because I was thinking of tinkering with another character and slowly leveling it when I have time to, then alter it to one of the new races after 5.0 hits. I don't want to switch my long-time characters. I want to play with a new race. So we don't just get one with expansions. When A Realm Reborn came out, it was a 30-day veteran reward. I believe you still earn it from completing the Praetorium as long as you don't use a skip potion. And we got one with a pre-order bonus for Heavensward, but we don't just get one. We got the one with Heavensward because it was the first time they were adding a new race. They haven't said they're going to do anything for it with Viera coming out, but I think a lot of us are still expecting it to maybe happen. It's kind of rough because would it be nice? Would it be the right thing for them to do? Absolutely. I wouldn't be surprised if they just see how much money they've made off of Fantasias that they just don't do it this time. Like from a business standpoint, you're offering a new race, new players will pick that race up, new characters will. Any player who wants to will buy a Fantasia. So it's a rough situation because it'd be nice if they did, but I don't think they will because I don't think they have to. You got to remember when Heavensward was announced, we didn't even have a cash shop yet. Cash shop was one of those things that was like a 3.0 feature. So the Fantasia in general was like a brand new concept back then. They've seen it, they've seen the data, and I'm not hopeful. I don't want one, but I totally feel for people who do want one. And if you are looking to do that exact thing you said right there, as long as you don't use a story skip potion, or yeah, I'm pretty sure as long as you don't use the story skip potions, that the Praetorium will give you a Fantasia. Question number 4. Hello, Mr. Happy, and hope you're having a wonderful day. It's my first day back in a schedule, and I love it. My question is, how do you think we're going to get the Regalia car mount? Do you think it's going to be from completing quests or doing the Garuda fight with Noctis over and over again? So I'm torn on this because I think they're going to do it like Rathalos. I think there is going to be a solo player instance against the Garuda, the Final Fantasy 15 Garuda, in which you and Noctis team up and fight them, just you and Noctis. But I feel like there's gonna be like a 4-player extreme mode too, similar to Rathalos, where it's not really role specific. And then that is you're gonna have to farm that 50 times probably, unless you get it as a drop, in order to guarantee your Regalia. Now, there's nothing to say it has to work that way. There's nothing to even suggest there's gonna be a 4-player extreme. It's just an expectation that is there because of Rathalos. And oh my goodness, what am I doing? There we go. For all we know, it could just be complete the quests and you get a Regalia, but we don't know yet. So it's one of the two. I think it is just either going to be a 4-man extreme or completing the quests. But I don't think it's going to be doing the solo fight with Noctis over and over again. That I don't think, but I could be wrong. Question number 5. Hey Haps, hello. Seeing as you're a monk main, I gotta ask, what are some of your favorite martial arts moves? So I don't know very many martial art move names. I just know I like to punch, I like to kick, and I've always liked punching, and I've always liked kicking. So I don't know if that's the Jersey anger in me. The yo, you wanna start something, yo, you look, I got a chain on. So yeah, I don't know if it's any of that, but I just like to punch and kick, tornado kick, if you will. Question number 6. Hey Haps, as of writing this, I believe you're currently moving, so I hope everything went smoothly by the time you read this. Thank you very much. TLDR would be for all classes, what would be your favorite class quest storyline for each of the expansions? Finally made it my goal to level all battle classes. I've got a smattering of 50s, 60s, and a few 70s, and one thing I've been really enjoying is all the class quests. I had no idea what I was missing by not leveling Dragoon before 3.0. I still have a long way to go, and I'm mostly enjoying the ride, but I was just curious, what are some of your favorites? The 2.0 Dragoon story quest and the payoff that we had in patch 2.5 is definitely a highlight. Monk, I've really liked it. It's gone back and forth between comical and very enlightening in regards to some historic features inside of Alamigo and the journey of certain individuals. Hem and Holy Fist was a great character to watch as a pugilist, and as we've gone throughout Monk, we've seen so many more characters, Vidargelt, and everyone else. There's a lot of great things that happen there. The Dark Knight storyline quest, little too anime for me, but it has a lot of very important story implications that are probably going to be relevant coming into Shadowbringers, considering the Warrior of Darkness or Dark Knight is kind of like the main job of the expansion based on what we've seen so far. There's a lot of really good ones. Red Mage is good. Samurai, I'm 50-50 with the Samurai. There are certain implications in the back half of them. Warrior was okay. The most recent one I actually really liked, but it was more on the comedy side and less on, I guess, the Berserker Rage theme that Warrior is kind of known for. Paladin I've never really been a big fan of. There's some interesting implications there, but it's just kind of boring to me. Ninja was interesting. It made me jealous that we couldn't do half the stuff the NPCs do, which happens pretty much with every job quest. Bard's been pretty interesting as well. There's a few interesting implications there. I'd say at the very least, most of them, at least I find interesting. And then there are a few that I find exceptional, and then there's one or two that I don't really like. Regardless of the expansion, I will say this, Dragoon 4.0 is a very enlightening one. And I would highly recommend getting to those at some point, because the Dragoon 4.0 ones are very satisfying, even if you've already done the main scenario quests. And you're just learning about them after the fact. It's mostly because one of the key characters throughout a lot of the Dragoon quests is one that I find very interesting and one that I hope we see more of. Question number 7. Hey Haps, how would a new player get into raiding in 14, as well as how active is the raiding community after the first month of the expansion? So the raiding community is pretty much always active. There's always a mix of people who are re-clearing all the time, people who are helping others clear for the first time, people who are trying out on new jobs, people who are trying to get into it. I will say that the best time to get into raiding is at the start of a raid tier. It is when nobody has any expectations, it's not solidified strategies yet. Even if there are, people are still learning it for the first time, so people are a little more willing to take in people who don't have a whole lot of raiding experience. Or you may just have friends that want to try it for the first time and it just came out and it's just a good time for you guys to get together and give it a shot. That's pretty much the best way, is to try and time it, because then once you have a little bit of raiding experience, it pretty much sets you up for all the raiding experience you'll need in the future. That being said, if you were to try right now, it's a little tougher, not because there's not people doing it, but because the people who are doing it are much less tolerant of newcomers right now. More often than not, you need to be involved in something that is getting new players in the door. You know, odds are you're not just going to the party finder and joining a learning party. It absolutely can happen, especially during peak hours. You do see a lot of learning parties or, you know, attempting first clear party kind of things, but it's a little tougher. One big thing that I think people are a little too greedy for this for their first clear. Your first clear doesn't need to be a 2 chest, meaning it doesn't need to be 8 out of 8 new players. I'd highly recommend that most people looking to get their foot in the door for raiding take 1 chests or no chest. No chest is a little iffy because at some point it comes close to the experienced people outweighing the inexperienced people, and thus it starts to get closer to like carry, to like you not really learning it, you getting carried through it. It doesn't have to be the case, but it can be the case, and it's a little iffy at that point. But don't feel like you need to go for a 2 chest if you're trying to get into the raid scene. The most important thing is getting your foot in the door, and if that means taking a 1 chest or a no chest, go for it. Question number 8. Greetings, Mr. Happy. I hope your move goes as smooth as possible. Once I'm finished unpacking all the boxes, it'll be a lot better. But, you know, for the time being, I'm off to a decent start. So thank you. So I've never even set foot in Eureka. Everything I've heard about it does not make it sound like content I'd be interested in. I do like the glamour for a white mage, and I adore the Ozma mount. Do you think they'll make it easier to do Eureka when Shadowbringers comes out? Or do you think it might be so dead that people are make it impossible to achieve? Basically, if I was going to try to pursue those things, when would be the best time to do so? I always think it's the best time to pursue something when it's new. Because regardless of how you... I guess if you want the rewards, regardless of how you feel about it, you're gonna try to eat the chicken. You know, as Sly would say, we're all trying to eat the free chicken, okay? And right now, while there's a ton of people doing it, there's good reasons to do it that are relevant to the game's current state, then it's a good time. Later on, I have no doubt that at least the relic weapon and armor will be almost entirely soloable by the time Shadowbringers comes out. This is something they've done with every relic prior, and I know exploration zones are not like the previous relics, but I have a feeling they'll probably still go that route, especially with the things that are available in Hydatos and Pyros. If those things were available earlier on, then it would make the earlier zones not soloable entirely, but at least a lot more tolerable to solo. I've no doubt that just for that weapon and for the armor that you're talking about, that won't be a problem. Baldessian Arsenal for Ozma is a different story. We don't know how they're going to treat that when we go into the expansion. We don't know how Eureka in terms of unsyncing or, you know, power curve or any of that stuff's going to matter. What I will tell you is most content that doesn't have a huge populace, certain PvP maps, as well as certain other key features in the game, that a diadem, for example, which is pretty much long been abandoned. There are people who form communities to do that stuff long after its prime. There's Revival Wings, of course, which isn't as relevant now because we did just get the new map, so the queue times are okay at least during peak hours. And then Diadem, there was like weekly Diadem runs as well, and I've seen them for other things. I have no doubt that after Shadowbringers comes out, there will be a community that rises up of people who still try to organize doing the Baldessian Arsenal. And you know what? By then, it'll probably be even easier to organize than it is now, because right now, especially with the changes to the stabilizers, it can be pretty rough to form groups properly and get in with everyone who wants to go in properly. There's a lot of growing pains there that I really hope they learn from, because Baldessian Arsenal was a fun piece of content, just surrounded by flaws in terms of entry, as well as some reward structure problems that I personally feel they still haven't recommended with the most recent update. So with that, I think you will be able to do them both in Shadowbringers, but the way you approach them both will be very different. One, you'll probably be able to approach solo. The other will probably be set communities that are still attempting that content on a probably weekly basis. Question number 9. Hi, Mr. Happy. Hope the move to your new home has been smooth and stress-free. Stress-free it has not been. Smooth, actually, not too bad. For this week, I wanted to ask some tank-themed questions, as I'm looking forward to trying out Gunbreaker for when 5.0 comes out. I wanted to play a tank for a while, but I can never really get into the current tank, so I hope Gunbreaker will be what I'm looking for. Feel free to pick which question you want. Tank's aiming for that high damage, and tanking advice? So I'm probably more qualified to answer number 2. but I'm more curious about question number 1. So let's kick that off. This might not be the best question to ask, but I've wanted to talk about the high damage mindset tank players have in content. Although I've never played WoW, after hearing about the traditional playstyle tanks have, I think I lean towards it more. So I don't mind having the high DPS playstyle in 14. In fact, I have a lot of respect for tanks that play well at their role in dealing high damage. There's one thing I've seen that bothers me, and that's when main tanks fight bosses and take tank busters in their DPS stance. I understand they do it for damage, and I'm probably nitpicking, but to me it feels like an unnecessary risk to themselves, especially for less experienced tanks. Plus, it puts a bit more pressure on the healers just for the sake of a little more damage. I think all I would like to see more encouragement for tanks to stay in their tank stances. The best I can think of, though, is giving positional requirements for the combos and give the main tank stances added effect for ignoring positional requirements. I don't know if that would work, but I thought I'd give my thoughts on it. Do you have any thoughts on this? Do you think the high DPS mindset we have for 14 is okay, or would you like it changed in some way? So here's the thing. I'm indifferent as long as it's fun. I actually really like the high DPS mindset that we have, but I totally get that's not the fantasy for a lot of people. For a lot of people, they want to be that staunch protector, you know. They don't just want to be a sword and board paladin. They want to be focused on nobody's going to be taking damage while I'm around. I'm going to have aggro. I'm going to be able to throw protective barriers on you. I'm going to be able to intervention you. I'm going to be able to cover you. You know, depending on, obviously it's not the same for all the other tanks, but that sort of, I want to be a tank mentality is there. I'm not here to deal damage. I'm here to let them deal the damage. That being said, that's just not how 14 operates. The one thing you mentioned in particular, and I guess I'll hit on that first, is tanks taking abilities outside of tank stance. So first of all, I like to say for warrior, that really doesn't matter. Their tank stance doesn't actually reduce the damage they take. It just increases their health pool. And as for the other tanks, even regardless of this, that's why we have tank cooldowns, especially on more casual content. The basic auto attacks that you take are not really worth being in the tank stance to mitigate. They're also, depending on the boss, not really worth spending that many cooldowns on either. Now, that's specifically referring to bosses. On trash mobs, it's a little bit different. You need a much tighter cooldown rotation. But the people who play that high DPS playstyle, they're not just only pressing their DPS buttons. It's that's actually, I guess not a misconception, but it's something that's kind of overlooked when people talk about the high DPS playstyle. Those people are so efficient with their defensive cooldowns and their team play that the amount of health that they would have from being in the tank stance is so high that losing all that damage is not worth it. Like if I'm in tank stance and I'm taking a tank buster and then I ramparted as well. Okay, maybe I took 28,000 damage and I have like 30,000 HP left. Did I really need the extra 20% that came from that shield oath when I could have just been doing more DPS this whole time? No, I really didn't. And then you could say, okay, but then if you're in the tank stance, then you wouldn't have needed the rampart in the first place. But then you have it. And if the tank buster isn't doing enough to you to make you consider using the rampart, then then what's the point of the rampart? So you get the most out of your, the most skilled use is using your defensive cooldowns properly when in the DPS stance, as is aggro management. I mean, when you have two tanks, the provokes and the shirks is a very tight thing. Aggro and DPS and tanking, realistically, everything is kind of just team play in 14. You know, you want to make sure your DPS are using the feint for your tank so he can stay in the DPS stance. You want to make sure your paladin's using Divine Veil to protect everyone else because you don't have any other defensives and it'll save your healers from having to do a little bit of extra work. You want your healers to lay down shields beforehand and then have instant off global cooldown heals so they can use their global cooldowns on DPS. All of these things are working together. And tanking in DPS stance is another one of those things. Whereas tanking in the tank stance, you kind of are just self-reliant. And again, that's how some people want to play, and I totally respect that. But in Final Fantasy XIV, it's not how it works. Now, I will say this. I do find the high DPS playstyle more fun. If they lowered tank damage and gave us more bosses that made us feel like we had to be in tank stance, I'd be okay with that. But people would still try to push the boundary on it. As long as it's possible to survive, then people are going to do it that way. If it's not possible to survive without being in tank stance, then the players who aren't as good start to stand out a little bit more because the healers still can't deal with the pressure because they're still dealing with a similar level of pressure. There's all sorts of different variables and elements to this that do not make for a definitive yes-no answer. You always have to think about the entire game's gameplay system and how everyone interacts with each other. So I'm of the opinion if they added bosses that attacked way more frequently and had a lot more damage requirements, so much so that you weren't just dealing with a tank buster here, or, you know, maybe an instant tank buster followed by a slow tank buster, or slow followed by a fast, or if it wasn't so, I guess, paced the way it was, and it was paced a lot faster, then yeah, you probably need to be in tank stance. I'd be okay with that because there'd be a good reason for it. Unless they create the monsters, not just the player themselves, the monsters need to force you into that tank stance. Until they do that, I'll be for this high DPS stance. But I do agree, less experienced players shouldn't jump right in. They need experience doing this, but they need to make sure they understand how their job works before they focus on staying in a DPS stance. If they don't know how to hold aggro in that DPS stance, if they don't know how to properly rotate their cooldowns in that DPS stance, then it's a hindrance to do it that way. And those players need to take their time learning the little intricacies of their job before they focus too much on the more intricate aspects of the job in terms of dealing DPS. All right, this is the last question, which is good because I definitely could use some water. Hello, Mr. Happy. Hope your move went well. Thank you very much. First time asker, long time follower. As a bonus, I have 2 questions. Oh, you know what? I'm here to ask 1 question as my bonus. I'll ask 2 questions. That's okay by me. One, I was just wondering what sort of gameplay you would like to see for the Gunbreaker job. I mean, let's be honest. We can already kind of predict a lot of how Gunbreaker is going to play. We need to know how the job gauge is going to work, how the ammo is going to work. But, I mean, they're still going to have, you know, a basic 1-2-3 combo, a couple of defensive cooldowns, a super tank and vulnerability cooldown. We don't know how they're changing role actions, so we can't really talk too much on that. They're probably going to have a DPS stance. They'll probably have a tank stance, you know. There's at least a baseline of predictability, but how they access their skills and their damage, that's really where the change is. You know, do they automatically reload ammo after a certain amount of time? Do they have to press a skill to do it? How do they actually go about expending it? At first it kind of sounded like Dark Arts, then it almost kind of sounded like a DPS stance. Maybe they need to be in their DPS stance to use it, and then when they turn the DPS stance off, it automatically reloads over time. You know, maybe, and that kind of starts to sound like, not Dark Arts, I don't play Dark Knight. You know what skill I'm talking about. Dark Side. There you go. Then that starts to sound like Dark Side. So no matter what, I don't think it's going to be like this crazy dynamic gameplay. We can probably predict the majority of how it's going to go. But the intricacies are how it can be made fun. You know, Dark Knight's Dark Arts spam, not fun for a lot of people. Warriors 10-second super OP window, fun for some, not fun for others. Paladins back and forth between physical mode with fighter flight, and then going into magical mode for 10 seconds with Requiescat. You know, there are people who like and dislike that. What will this one do that's like those? And it's not going to be it's not going to be some crazy dynamic, but there's no way to really predict it either. 2, I've been playing on and off since Realm Reborn launched, but many of my friends are just starting as WoW refugees. Currently, everyone is learning what they like and want to main. We were a small raiding guild in WoW and wondering how much you recommend preparing to raid as a guild in 14. Preparing to raid as a guild in 14 is really just having crafters to make day 1 crafted armor, having a bunch of materia, and probably leveling crafters yourself so it's really easy to do the melds yourself. Other than that, it's not too complicated. I mean, once you get used to the way the game plays, you start recognizing patterns more quickly, you start being able to dissect fights a lot more quickly. As long as you have a raider's mentality, regardless of the game, you'll fit in 14 really well. 14 is, at times, it seems a bit overwhelming, but really, it's just because there's so much information because they want to include so many different things. But as a hardcore MMOer, it is, it does appear as baby's first MMO. You know, a lot of hardcore MMO players don't need a lot of the advice and a lot of the direction 14 gives. And I feel like for raiding, outside of the fact that it's a lot more jump ropey, you'll probably be all right, as long as you're just going into it with a raider's mentality. But anyway, that's going to be the last question for the forums. I'm not recording this one live because I was doing a sponsored stream for Dissidia Opera Omnia, so decided to take a break for lunch and then start this up again. And then I didn't even go and get lunch because the place I was going to go to is closed because I don't really know this area yet because they were closed for between lunch and dinner. So now I got to figure out what the hell I'm doing after the, I don't know. Either way, you don't need to hear me talk about it. I'm going to go look for food now. So thank you everyone for watching this weekly Q&A. Also thank you to our Patreon sponsors, our patrons, for supporting us through hashtag demonetized again. Not going to name you all again, but I'm thanking you again, okay? If you want to ask a question for Mondays with Mr. Happy, ask it in the description of the video. There will be a link to the forums. Go there, ask it. It'll guarantee that I at least see it, and as long as it's an appropriate question, I'll make sure to give it an appropriate answer. Anyway, thank you for watching. I will see all of you in the next week's weekly Q&A. And until then, take care.